I hope when you came in you received this little thing. This is the text of what you just saw. It is so profound, I think, that we all ought to take it home and put it on our refrigerators. Instead of giving us more stuff, he gave us himself. God had entered into the very situation he wants to heal. God gave us his presence. God showed up in our neighborhood so we would know who the eternal God is and what he's really like. God now had a face and a voice and walked among us. The miracle of Christmas in a nutshell is this: God showed up. The Gospel of John says the Word became flesh. And depending on your version of it, and lived in our neighborhood, or moved into the neighborhood, or dwelt among us, or lived among us, or whatever. The point is, the Word became flesh. God showed up. And you and I are people that need flesh and blood. I'm going to tell you 3 stories today. 3 stories which I think are great examples of how important flesh and blood is to us, how much we need it in our lives. And then I'm going to tell you a few of my own stories of times when that flesh and blood has meant something to me or has been shared with me. First story. 12-year-old boy, the son of a missionary in Africa, was sent by his parents to school in the United States. His parents wanted to provide him with every opportunity to have a good education and were willing to endure family separation in order to do what they thought was best for their son. When Christmas came, the parents were in Africa and their son was in school in the United States. Most of the boy's classmates at the boarding school went home for the holidays, but there was no way that he could go home. It was too far, too costly. As he sat in his room, lonely, his house mother happened to walk by. She noticed his loneliness and tried to show him some kindness. She sat down with him on his bed and spoke to him about general things. Then she asked him what he wanted for Christmas. She expected to hear the usual list of things like toys and clothes and money. But the boy surprised her. He stepped over to his dresser, took the picture of his mom and dad into his hands, and softly said, "I wish my mom and dad could step out of this picture and be here with me right now. And that's what I want for Christmas." Touched by his sadness, the two of them sat on the bed and cried together. I wish my mom and dad could step out of this picture right now, right here. Have you ever wanted that? Looked at a picture and said, oh, I wish they could just step out of that picture and be here with me in the flesh. Sometimes we do that with pictures of people who have died, loved ones, friends. I just wish they could step out of the picture and be with me right here, right now. We are in the flesh people. Story 2. A mother was putting her daughter to bed in the midst of a thunderstorm. She told her daughter that she did not need to be frightened, that her mother and father were close by, right in the living room. And the girl replied to her mother, Mommy, but when it thunders this way, I want somebody with skin on. In the other room isn't good enough, is it? I want somebody with skin on right here that I can feel and touch. It gives me a sense of security in the midst of my fear. I just want somebody with skin on. Don't leave me all by myself in my bedroom. I want somebody with skin on. I think we often feel isolated too like that. Maybe not in the midst of thunderstorms, but isolated from others. And what we crave is somebody with skin on. You know, it's one thing to pick up the phone, it's one thing to get a card, and I don't mean to diminish those in any way. Those are important. For our younger generation, the contact they have on Facebook is amazing. I commend it at one level. But there are times when we just want somebody with skin on. And story number 3. This is told by Dietrich Reichel. He wrote about his feelings that came over him one December night in Germany in 1944 during a bomb attack. He writes, "Many thousands of people died that night, and after the worst was over, I found myself lying with my head on a suitcase in a waiting room of a railroad station. The roof was cracked, and I saw the flames leaping up outside, and my eyes caught the inscription on the ceiling, a quotation from the poet Schiller. 'Beyond the stars there must live a gracious Father.' And I shook my fist at the sky, saying, I don't want that kind of God who hovers above the clouds and does not care. I want a God who is with us when the bombs fall, where the iron curtains are, where all courage and confidence and strength are gone. I want God there and nowhere else. I want a God who's with us when the bombs fall, when life gets tough, when life gets scary. For whatever reason, we want a God who's with us. And the miracle of Christmas is that God showed up. The Word became flesh. Flesh. This isn't some spirit in Bethlehem. This is flesh and blood like you and me. And I love the translation that we read today. And I know it sounded a little strange to us, but it's from the Message. Because verse 14 of chapter 1 of John in the Message reads, "And the Word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. He lives right here." How cool is that? We have a God that can step out of the picture and be here right now. We have a God with skin on. And we have a God who's with us when even the bombs fall. The Word became flesh. It's a powerful statement about a God who loves us. It's a powerful statement about the presence of Jesus every day in our lives. But I think it also pushes us a little further. I think this is not just a statement about God becoming flesh in Jesus, but about how we as the body of Christ become the flesh of Jesus to one another. How can the Word become flesh in today's world? And I think that happens through you and I. I believe Jesus is present always. But I believe that we sort of, by our actions, our words, our deeds, put the flesh on God today. So here's some things in my life that I've noticed where God has become flesh for me. I want somebody, by the way, a God who's going to step out of the picture and be here now. I want a God who has skin on, and I want a God who's going to walk with me when the bombs fall. And so God showed up in my life about 5.5 years ago when my dad died. And you know where he showed up? In you. In that lounge in the other room. We didn't do a visitation from my dad at a funeral home like so many do. Instead, we came here. My whole family and all of you. I was amazed at the quantity of people that passed through that room, that greeted me. It didn't matter what you said. What mattered is that you came. You were in the flesh. And when we got home that evening, my siblings looked at me and said, "Wow, you've got an amazing congregation." And they were right. God in the flesh, in you, caring for me. What an amazing night that was for me. I have no clue what any of you said to me. I couldn't even tell you which ones of you sent me cards. But I can tell you the impact of your presence was amazing. Just amazing. You showed up. You moved into my neighborhood. Now, one of my goals for 2013 was to not have any surgeries. Sounds a little strange, but for like 5 or 6 years prior to that, I'd had a surgery almost every year. And I just kind of said, I'm not doing a surgery this year. None. I don't care what hurts or what happens. No surgery. I want you to know I accomplished that. But a few years ago, when I did have surgery, and I was convalescing at home, my walking buddies showed up. Now, my walking buddies, Randy and I joke about these two ladies, but they were the ones that would meet me at the mall every Tuesday and every Thursday morning, and we would walk and huff and puff together, and we would talk, and then we'd go our separate ways. And my walking buddies called me up one morning as I convalesced at home and said, "We're bringing lunch today." And they showed up at my house with soup and salad in hand. And we sat and we kibitzed like we do at the mall. We didn't huff and puff. But they showed up. They cared enough to bring a meal and to sit with me for a couple of hours. They showed up. They moved into my neighborhood. They were God in the flesh for me. I have a girlfriend that lives down in Elma. She and I have been friends for over 30 years. I don't see her a lot, but every Thursday she comes to Amherst to have her hair done. And when she comes all the way to Amherst from Elma, she tends to spend the day up here and run errands and go to the Eastern Hills Mall, because they don't have malls in Elma. But she does all sorts of running around when she's up here, and the day is usually very, very full. But a couple, 3 times a year, I'll get a phone call about 11:30. "What are you doing for lunch?" And if my schedule is free, we usually meet about 1 o'clock, and sometimes I don't go home till dinner time. And we just share together our lives and care about one another in a way that friends do. God in the flesh for me in that time and place. And then there's Jerry, my next door neighbor in Arizona. He's actually from Minnesota. Of course, I think half the park is from Minnesota. But one day, Jerry saw me outside. We have this plant, and I think it's of the yucca family, but I'm not sure, that grows right in front of the park model. And each year it adds new leaves, and the leaves underneath it die. And to make it look halfway decent, you got to take those dead leaves off. And the only way to take the dead leaves off is to put heavy-duty gloves on, because they're prickly. Not the gloves, but the plant. And you have to yank each dumb leaf off. It's hard work. I remember my dad and Mr. Blankenship, his good friend, sitting there all day doing this. Of course, they'd sit in the chair and they'd yank a few and they'd talk and they'd drink coffee. And here I stood, and after 10 or 12 leaves, I'd about had it up to here. And out of the park model next door comes Jerry with a little saw. And he says, Nancy, I think this might be easier. And sure enough, he even took them to the trash. Silly little things. He didn't have to come out and do that. But he did. A little bit of God in the flesh for me that day. And I've heard stories from others about how we have been God in the flesh to them. Remember last summer, there was a small group of us, maybe 6 or 7, who took a trip down to Herkimer. Herkimer had experienced a flood from one of the aftermaths of the hurricanes or some, I don't remember exactly what had happened, but something had happened. And the basement of one of our Lutheran churches had been severely flooded. It was a long, long road of recovery for them. And we got a few people from this congregation to hop in a car one day, drive down there, help to clean out mold and mildew from their basement, spend the night, go back and do it again the next day, and then turn around and drive home. Didn't take more than 2 days of our time. Had a great time laughing and playing together down there. But the pastor said to me while we were there, you have no idea what this means, that you came. You didn't just send money. You didn't just say prayers. Those are important. But you came. God showed up. God moved into the neighborhood in the flesh. And you know that on these first weekends of every month, we call up everybody who takes communion out to our sick and shut-in. And you all probably look at them and go, oh, here we go again. You know, let me tell you about that ministry, my friends. Let me tell you that we've got almost 20 shut-ins in this congregation, and at least, I think it's 15 of them, receive communion on a monthly basis because there's people in this congregation who will take communion to them. What a gift. I go too, but I don't go on a monthly basis. And when I go to see those folks, if they are able, they without a doubt have said something like this to me. It means so much to me that someone from church came. And the Word became flesh and moved into our neighborhood. Or in the words of the video, God showed up. That's what Christmas is. It's about God coming in the flesh. And I could sit here and tell you a whole bunch about the doctrine of the incarnation, and you're all going to go. The doctrine of the incarnation is nothing more than God in the flesh. God in the flesh. God moving into the neighborhood. God showing up. God showed up in our neighborhood. And because he showed up in our neighborhood, because he was in the flesh for us, because he's a God who steps out of the picture, he's a God who with skin on, he's a God who's with us when the bombs fall. You and I can take our experience of God in the flesh with us and share it with others in the flesh for them, as you have for me and for others. What a gift that is. The best Christmas gift ever. And it is, in my opinion, the miracle of Christmas. God showed up. Amen.